Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Capital One is starting its long-term process of integrating the Discover network into its lineup with its credit cards, but they're starting with their debit cards, which makes a lot of sense. So, this coming from Doctor of Credit, Capital One has announced that it will be switching the Capital One debit card from the MasterCard Payment Network to the Discover Payment Network. New cards will be issued. They'll have a new 16-digit number, CVV codes, and expiration dates. Everything else on the cards will remain the same according to Capital One. You can still use it for everyday use. You just have to look for the Discover Post logo or the Diners Club International logo. Questions, check out their FAQs, contact them. They recently merged. It's not too huge a surprise. Big question is if Capital One will transition credit card holders over at some point too. That is the open question, but laying the groundwork for moving to the Discover network with debit cards makes sense that eventually you're going to see credit cards move over to that network as well. What this allows Capital One to do is save money on the interchange fees that they have to pay MasterCard. And since they own Discover, now all of the interchange fees that Discover is paying stays in their pocket. And that net difference can represent some sort of savings. The exact savings, I don't know offhand, but it would be relatively large, especially as there's more Capital One debit card holders probably than Discover debit card holders. And so those swipes will start equaling some amount of money. The big money is going to be when the Quicksilver and the Saver for Good Credit, and I'll even throw in the Venture One, when those cards get moved over to the Discover network, then the net savings from MasterCard plus all that they get to keep with Discover will allow them to further invest in the Discover network. So this is going to be a multi-stage and multi-pronged type project for Capital One. Step one is going to be moving cards over to the Discover network. They're starting with the debit card because it's largely inconsequential. You don't have to worry about rewards. You don't have to worry about too much more than producing the card, giving people their new card number, giving them their new CVV, and going about their day. Prong two is going to be further expanding the Discover network. In the far off future, say in the next 5 to 7 years, 2032, you probably won't see the name of the network being the Discover network anymore. It'll probably just be the Capital One network for branding purposes, right? So you're going to see this network grow, and Capital One should be investing significantly into this network and expanding not only here in the United States, but also internationally. Capital One cards are already known for having no foreign transaction fees, and they get to keep all of the money on the interchange fee. You can see a little bit start to grow, right? Now, I don't think you're going to see cards moved over this year, but I do think you're going to see credit cards from Capital One move to the Discover network sooner than later. Those are going to be, again, the lower tier cards. You're talking about the Capital One Platinum card, the Capital One Quicksilver, maybe the Venture One. And when I say Quicksilver, all flavors of the Quicksilver. Saver, probably the Saver for Good Credit and the Saver for Students is going to be on the Discover network. The Good Saver that is with excellent credit, you get the welcome offer, you get all the bells and whistles. That card is probably going to stay on MasterCard for the time being. I don't know what happens to the Venture card, but Venture One would probably move over. I don't know what happens on the business side of things. Probably the low end business cards will also move over to Discover relatively soon, just because those business swipes can be more lucrative. And so it makes sense that one or two of those might move over as well. And so what you're going to see is a slow rollout, but a number of cards over the next 2 or 3 years move to the Discover network, where eventually the Saver bells and whistles is going to be moved over there as well. The Venture card, not the Venture X, is going to be moved over there as well. Venture X for Business are still heavy hitters on the Visa network. I don't know if there's a difference between how much Capital One pays Visa versus how much they pay MasterCard. It seems as they're moving off of MasterCard and starting to move their MasterCards over. They're probably paying MasterCard more. So there's that. But, when this completes and, they've expanded the network, they've got everything there, they're making more money than previously thought, that's when they're going to move the Venture X. Now, I don't think you're going to see Venture X moved over to the Discover network before the end of the decade. I don't think there's enough time. I don't think there's enough build out. if they get this project completed in, say, 7 years, by 2032, you could see the Venture X and the Venture X for Business also moved over to the new payment network. When this merger was announced, I said that the best play, the biggest play that Capital One could make would be a long-term investment in growing this network and creating a capability that in time, all their cards are there, and then they can take on American Express. This is the first step. Now, this is going to be a years-long process. So don't expect that tomorrow the Saver card is going to be on the Discover network. That's not going to happen. The Quicksilver would probably be the first like rewards earning card that gets moved over. And the other one that might move over would be the Capital One Venture X. I don't know what happens on the Discover side of things. The Discover It is probably the only card on the Discover side of things that will probably exist long term. Chrome is probably going to get moved to, it's probably going to be discontinued. The Discover Miles card will probably be discontinued or rebadged as the Capital One Venture one when that moves over to the Discover network. I don't know. And then there's a cashback card that's 1% and 2% on select categories. That will also probably just go away or become a Quicksilver. So there's not going to be a ton of redundancy, I don't think. But again, this is like the next 2 or 3 years. Discover It will make a lot of sense to keep. Capital One Saver card will eventually move over there. All flavors of the Saver. The Quicksilver is probably going to be the first rewards credit card that moves over. They'll keep the Platinum card probably as a just getting on the ramp of credit cards. So that card will probably stay. That will also be another card that probably moves over. Given the clientele of Capital One, it probably makes sense to keep those folks on the Discover, move those folks over to the Discover side, because then Capital One gets to make money both directions, where they'll make money on the swipe fees and they'll make money on the interest. Not the greatest, but hey, Capital One makes its money. So it's interesting to see how they go about things, but this is the first step in what is going to be a long process, right? You're not going to wake up tomorrow or the beginning of 2026 and the Venture X is on the Discover network. That's not going to happen. But mid 2026, late 2026, you'll probably start seeing the Quicksilver move over and changes to the Discover cards to accommodate that. Quicksilver will probably be the big card on the Discover side for a little bit with its 1.5% cashback. It's also going to be the Discover It. Capital One, I don't think, is going to change the Discover It, but they are going to probably revamp it at some point or make that cashback movable to the Venture X and give you like a weird little trifecta of sorts where like you'll have that card for rotating categories and you'll have the Saver card as the lifestyle card and you've got the Venture X as the big boy travel card, with the Venture as a suitable replacement for the Venture X. It'll also be on the Discover network without lounge access, so we'll see what happens there going forward. That card's due for a refresh. The Venture X is going to be due for a refresh next year, so that'll be interesting to see. But the other thing that I want to touch on before I sign off, the savings that they'll be able to accrue once they build out their network sufficiently and get the network where they want it, the savings, the spend, the interchange fees, that growth in terms of revenue can potentially be used to bump some multipliers on the cards that we use every day. Now, is it going to be a huge bump? No, probably not. But you could see, theoretically, the Venture X go from a flat 2X card to 2.5. You could see the Saver card tack on another 1% to grocery and dining, or dining and entertainment, and bring back that 4% category. Or you're going to see the the Saver X potentially launch and bring back those 4% categories that it previously had. Probably with caps. 4% with Capital One miles transferred over to Capital One transfer partners would be very lucrative. Just putting this out there. It's interesting to see that Capital One is starting this play. It makes sense to start with debit cards. It'll be interesting to see where they are in the next year or two. Probably by the end of 2027, at least 1 or 2 credit cards from Capital One will be on the Discover network. And we will have some clarity with what's going to happen to Discover cards probably this time next year or beginning of 2027. So interesting moves by Capital One. Makes a lot of sense. But I'm going to conclude it here. If you like what I do, hit the subscribe button down below. Check out the pinned comment for ways to support me outside of YouTube. If you want to support me here on YouTube, consider becoming a channel member. $2.99 to join. You can cancel at any time. Check me out on the Stack Your Points podcast. We release the show on Wednesdays and Fridays here on YouTube. Check out the Bridge Banter podcast that I host with RJ from Stack Your Points. We talk about Star Trek Lower Decks. So non-credit card content for you if you want to hear me talk about not credit cards. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for your time. It could have been anywhere else. You decided to stick around with me. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.